All right, good evening, good evening, good evening. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good evening, good evening. It is Tuesday, just a few days before the Christmas on this Friday. And we're going to talk tonight about reparations, y'all. I have a phenomenal guest, but before I bring in my guest, we're going to give you guys just a few minutes to come on and join the broadcast. I have a quick little presentation that I'm going to do right before I bring in my guests, just to kind of open up the conversation about reparations. You know, I ran a campaign here in the state of Georgia, and at the top of my agenda, I spoke very boldly about reparations. I spoke very boldly about our need for redress. I didn't shy away from the conversation. I talked Black to us. You know, I didn't shy away from that conversation. I never left us out. And when you run a campaign and you're a candidate, you have to have an inclusive agenda. And one thing I can say about the race that I ran, I was real clear that, you know, I wasn't going to leave Black people out. I wasn't going to not talk about the needs of the Black community. How can I not? I'm a Black woman. How can I not talk about the Black community? And I spoke very specifically to that. So that was very different because, you know, in politics, that's a bit taboo to talk Black and to talk about us and to talk about us specifically. But I did. And I think there was a lot of people along the way. I ran this race to the United States Senate, came in 6th place of 21 candidates. 5 candidates ahead of me had millions of dollars or influence. So for me to be a true grassroots candidate and to run a race and talk about reparations, you know, that was different. And for me to place that close to the top with over 106,000 votes said a lot about where I believe we are as a nation. You know, I think I garnered a lot of attention, you know, not just from Black voters, but from voters from all nationalities, all races. I think people were just, you know, I think we know, Americans, we know the problems. So tonight we're going to talk about reparations, and it's going to be a 2-part series with Professor Reginald Muhammad. He's going to join me in just a few minutes, but just to give you, like I said, I'm going to do a quick little presentation. You know, we are 13-14% of the population as Black people here in these United States. We have about 2.6% of this nation's wealth. That wealth is pretty concentrated. That wealth is concentrated amongst athletes, entertainers. It's the rest of us, we're broke. White America has 10 times the wealth as Black America. 10 times. 10 times, y'all. So we have to be mindful that, you know, who's on the bottom here. And this stems not just from slavery, but from Black codes to Jim Crow to convict leasing to no New Deal, no GI Bill, redlining, war on drugs, mass incarceration, systemic generational damage and trauma to us as a people. So tonight I'm going to do a quick little presentation, and then I'm going to bring in Professor Muhammad to talk about y'all, my phone is ringing off the hook with robocalls. So we're going to bring in Professor Reginald Muhammad to talk reparations in just a few minutes. I hate that phone is ringing. I'm sorry. We'll bring in Professor Muhammad so he can help me out while I go get this phone so it can start ringing. Professor, welcome to the broadcast.
Good evening to you and the audience. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. And hopefully we'll get a chance to share with you and the audience some of what we've learned nearly over the last 30 years about reparations and our participation in reparations. I'm just delighted to be here, and I'm thankful and grateful and appreciative that you would have allowed me to be on the air with you and your many guests from around the country. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to do a quick little presentation. I'm going to share my screen, Professor, just for a second, just to talk about, you know, I want people to know the way I was introduced to this whole reparations movement is through the ADOS movement. So I've come through that movement. I've learned a lot from my ADOS family, and this is what I'm going to share about our demands for reparations. Reparations is to close the racial wealth gap. Reparations is the making of amends for a wrong that has been done to us by paying money to or to otherwise helping those who have been wronged. Has the United States paid reparations before? Yes. The forced internment of 120,000 Japanese Americans in camps during World War II. Those survivors received an apology and $20,000 each in reparations. And by 1998, 80,000 survivors had collected their share. Native Americans, they've received belated payments for unjustly seized land. Native Hawaiian land leases for the overthrown of a kingdom. The Tuskegee experiment, compensation for medical brutality. The United States has proven unwilling to grapple with the enormity of its injustices stemming from slavery. We are in the next civil rights movement, and we must demand reparations. According to the Institute for Policy Studies' Road to Zero Wealth report, the wealth of the median Black household is on a path to hit zero by 2053. And in sharp contrast, the median wealth of the white household is projected to be 137,000 by 2053. Generation after generation accumulation. Black America, 13% of the population, only has, again, about 2.6% of this nation's wealth. White America has 10 times more wealth as Black America. Black head of households with a college degree have 2/3 the net wealth of white head of household who never finished high school. So this was a presentation that I actually and I'll stop sharing there, was part of a presentation that I gave around Georgia as a candidate to just kind of set the foundation, and why I invited you tonight, Professor, I don't know why I keep wanting to call you professional, because I talk to the beauty and barber industry so often and I always refer to them as professional. So I think that's why it's coming out like that. But Professor Muhammad, this was a presentation that I did, like I said, across the state, and really trying to lay the foundation, because I actually had someone to ask me on the campaign trail, what is reparations? And this was an older gentleman who had never even heard the word before. So there's a lot of information that really, we don't even know what reparations is or why we are owed it. So that's why I invited you tonight. So thank you for joining me, Professor Reginald Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you again, and thank your audience for being here. Historically, and I think that's probably where you wanted to start with. Originally, let me just kind of introduce myself. I'm originally from Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, born in Tallahassee, Florida, at the old Florida A&M University Hospital. And I have been in the reparations movement for nearly 30 years now. What started my journey on reparations, I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Florida, as I just said. That is the base and the chair and home of the All African People's Socialist Party. They are based in St. Petersburg, Florida. The longest running revolutionary newspaper, called the Burning Spear newspaper, it's published out of St. Petersburg, Florida. And what's significant about that is that every year in the late 80s, there used to be a tribunal in St. Petersburg, Florida, an International Reparations Tribunal. And I had never heard of reparations in the 80s. And then so by early 90s, I'm teaching in Los Angeles, California at the Marcus Garvey School. And I pick up and I get a book called Stolen Black Labor. And Stolen Black Labor is really one of the first books written by us, published probably 83 or 84, written by Chairman Omali Yesatella. And what he had documented in that book, based on our enslavement here in America, we were owed a minimum of $4.1 trillion just on stolen labor that Europeans had extracted from us here in America. And what's key about that, Ms. Sheely, what's key about that, and to your audience, a lot of times when you hear about slavery, in the enslavement of us here in America, oftentimes, even with my students at the university level, they don't want to look at the past. And but my thing is, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward us in our research. If we know what happened yesterday, we are prepared to deal with today, because yesterday is built today is built on yesterday. And so at the end of the day, this this enslavement and working our people, they worked Black people for 310 years with no pay. Bottom line, they, to the degree, why is reparations needed? Why is it required? And why is it essential? Well, anytime you rob a people of their names, their language, their culture, and their God, then by 1863, they said we were free. Signing of the Emancipation Proclamation on into 1865. Free to do what and free to go where? A people who have been robbed of their names, their language, their culture, their God, and of course their land. And at the end of the day, they said you're free, but it's against the law for you to read and write while you have been captive here in America, colonized, chemicalized, castrated, all of the trauma that we suffered. They said you were free. Well, it was against the law for you to marry. It's against the law for you to read and write or to be educated. So, and as a result of that, the damage has never been repaired. And as a result of that, here we are in 2020 talking about repair and reparations. Others have gotten reparations, as you just said, but what about the Black man and woman here in the hills of North America who had never been compensated, who the injury has never been addressed? And it would be like, let's break it down like this. It would be like a man or woman who has been in an abusive relationship for 2 or 3, say if that woman has been 2 or 3 abusive relationships, and there's never been any repair of the damage psychologically, emotionally, and physically. She has never been healed. Then she goes into the 3rd relationship, where she brings some of that same baggage because the damage has never been repaired. So here we are, Black people in America, because the damage has never been repaired. You see it play out in different ways, socially, politically, economically, and even spiritually as a people. And so why slavery, why the enslavement and the entire slave movement in America is important, because you get the banking institution, you get the steel industry, you get the Industrial Revolution, you get in the insurance industry. All of these industries rest off the very back of free labor. America becomes the superpower because of the free labor of Blacks. And remember, cotton, tobacco, and sugar cane were key crops that the world depended on, especially cotton. Well, our people picked cotton for 300 years and was never paid. But we made America wealthy as a result of them picking crops, and especially cotton. And cotton was shipped all over the world. And at one point in time, 61% of all the cotton that the world used came from America. These were Black people. And at the end of the day, we have never been made whole. The damage is, we have never repaired the damage. And that's what reparations is about. So by the late 1800s, we have actually gotten reparations, Ms. Sheely, in America. The first Black woman to ever receive reparations, her name was Henrietta Woods, 1878. She actually sued her former slave owner in federal court in Ohio, and actually won $2,500. $2,500 was a lot of money at that time. She sued, of course, for $20,000, but she ended up winning $2,500. And her name again was Henrietta Woods, 1878. Then you go on to, by the late 1800s, you have the first organization, the largest organization ever to deal with pension or reparations or benefit or redress. There was a woman by the name of Callie House and Reverend Dickerson. They started an organization called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Fund. Let me say that, that's a mouthful. The National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Fund, Callie House and Reverend Dickerson. That's the oldest and the largest organization ever to deal with reparations or redress or pension or the debt that was owed to us. Callie House. And of course, her organization was destroyed by the federal government. They realized that she was organizing Black people by the hundreds of thousands. She had organized them. They were they had headquarters and chapters throughout America, and so they got them on tax fraud, on trumped up charges, and actually imprisoned Miss Callie House and helped break her movement. But she constantly lobbied and petitioned the federal government, the House and the Senate, for redress for Black people in America. So then after that, by the 20th century, you get W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois is really the first person in my studies who actually used the word reparations. And go back as early as 1915, Du Bois said that there were reparations, there was some faint reparations that was due to Africa as well as Blacks in America. And so you go back and read Du Bois's work, you'll find that he uses the word reparations. And then, of course, you come out of that, you hear the great works of Queen Mother Moore. And one of the things that, Ms. Shealy, and to your audience, Black women have always really been at the forefront of redress or reparations for Blacks in America. Black women have always been at that forefront. Give an example, we talked about Henrietta Woods, we talked about Callie House, of course, Queen Mother Moore, and a host of others that came after that time. And even today, there are Black women who are at the forefront of the reparations movement. It's not anything new.
And you know what?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? On the heels of on that, I'm actually reading a book called Beauty Shop Politics by Tiffany Gill.
Okay.
And this book really talks about all the work that, and I come from like I said, I come from the beauty and barber industry. So this book is talking about, the way my industry advanced, but it also is shedding so much light on how politics and these political movements were really birthed with this new technology of our hair, which the straightening comb and all the things that came out of us, grooming ourselves, and how politics was so interwoven into my industry. So yeah, these were all Black women, and there's a part of the book that I'm on now. A. Philip Randolph's wife was from the beauty industry. She did hair, and she really fueled his activism with, because he wasn't really making no money. So that was where her money was really helping to make, to help him to be the activist that he was.
Oh, absolutely. Good.
So there you go, talking about women in the movement.
Oh, absolutely.
And movement building.
Yeah, it's just that rich history. And so anytime you find Black women who don't support reparations, generally what I find, and historically and even today, if you find Black men or women who don't support reparations, generally they're not knowledgeable about it, or they're afraid of what the white ruling class or the backlash or the response from white liberals. That's generally why when we find Blacks who don't support reparations, either not knowledge about it, or the harshest term, ignorant about reparations, or again, worried about what the backlash from at least segments of the white ruling class will be if they took up the cause for reparations. Because we remember, only in the last 5 to 10 years, 10 years ago, we may not have been able to have this conversation with an audience, because reparations were looked upon as in a very extreme, a very militant, how
dare we, right?
Yeah.
How dare we ask for reparations? How dare you? And haven't we been good to you? Haven't we been good to you?
Absolutely. And also, I wanted to share with your audience, and you can one book that will help you, especially with the historical piece of just how much Black people lost in America and how much Africa lost as a result of the transatlantic enslavement and trafficking of Black people. Notice I did not say the transatlantic slave trade. I said the transatlantic enslavement and trafficking of Black people worldwide. Well, go get the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Dr. Walter Rodney. And he documents that some of your major banks that are still around today, the Lloyds of London banks, they were involved in the transatlantic enslavement and the enslavement and trafficking of Black people. You're talking about the Lloyds of London, you're talking about the Barclay banks, Alexander and David Barclay, involved in the transatlantic enslavement and trafficking of our people. private organizations, nonprofit organizations. There are literally slews of colleges and universities, including Harvard, Brown University, Cornell University, Georgetown, were involved. They own thousands of slaves. And so the endowments that they have today, which supersede the endowments that Black historic colleges have, sometimes 50-1, Ms. Shealy. At the end of the day, these endowments were built, and these sprawling campuses that you see were built in many instances off the backs of our people that were enslaved. And one of the things that my studies I've learned, it's not just the federal government that owe Black people from historically what has happened. But at the end of the day, you got the federal government, of course, and then you got state and local who are just as involved. Then you have nonprofit organizations. Then you have select multinational corporations. And then the fourth entity or body that's involved is former plantations. And today we can record and document and show that there's still over 40,000 plantations that are still in existence. And you trace their history back. They've changed some of the names of them, but those families enriched themselves off the backs of our people, the free labor they got from Black people. And what's critical about it also too is that never in the history, this is a historic part of the reparations, my conversation, never in the annals of history were people done the way Black people were done, the inflicted, traumatized, terrorized, tortured, and tormented. Traumatized, terrorized, tortured, and tormented for centuries. That had never happened to any other people before. If you look at the names that we wear today, we still wear many of the our last names are based on our enslavement here in America. This is how the residual and the lingering effect and the impact that slavery has had on us as a people. And so, and I'll bring it to a contemporary time. Anytime I walk across the campus at the Atlanta University Center, or whether I'm visiting down at Florida A&M, if I'm visiting at Grambling State University, I'm on the campus for within some hours or the next day, where we're gonna hear our people using language of a people that have been traumatized, terrorized, tortured, and tormented. Anytime, and so the level of disrespect, the disdain that we have for each other, the lack of initiative, the lack of the level of destruction, and the underdevelopment as a people, all of that can be traced right back to our enslavement right here in America. And so when I walk across the campus about a year ago, I had to stop young ladies from calling themselves out of their names, bitch and hoe, come here. Now, we at a university level. See, anytime you have a people who have been destroyed mentally, they will celebrate their own fall. If you look at how we even listen to our music, you look at some of our movies, you look at our plays, here we are a people that are celebrating our own fall. And so, and how we have fallen and based on our enslavement. So again, that's why reparations is necessary. That's why it's critical. And so let's fast forward historically where we are. So
before we fast forward, let me
yes.
read something that I actually found, that we were, between the manufacturing and the railroads, we were the largest single financial asset. We, the Black people.
Oh, absolutely.
More than the manufacturing and the railroads.
Yes. And remember, we laid much of the tracks free throughout, because one time the rail system, the major transportation system was the train, the rail system. And so there were Blacks who helped develop and build that and built it for free. And that was a major mode of as far as major transportation in the United States, the rail system. And so Black people were certainly involved in that. And certainly some of the companies that were around CSX rail systems, they were involved in this in the transatlantic enslavement and trafficking of Black people right here in America. And those are some of the select multinational corporations I'm talking about: B of A Bank, Wells Fargo, Aetna Life Insurance. It's just a host of select companies that are still around today. Some of them have changed their names, but at the end of the day, they were certainly involved and benefited from the enslavement of our people. And so now, organization. The other thing that's key, historically, we're the longest running body of people who have been organizing, talking, and supposedly educating and pushing for redress or reparations. We're the longest. There are others who have pushed for reparations, have gotten reparations. And you read the list of some of those names earlier. They have gotten reparations in America. You'll hear blacks and you'll hear white legislative officials and say America does not pay reparations. That's a lie. America, I have a whole list of here sitting here on my left side here of bodies of people here in the United States that have gotten reparations. And as late as 2016, the remaining surviving Jewish body in America that they said was below the poverty level got $12 million in reparations. And guess who pushed the bill through? Joseph Biden and President Obama. They got it through Congress without a problem. And at the end of the day, they got reparations as late as 2016. I'm not talking about 40, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 2016, the remaining Holocaust survivors right here in America got a package of reparations. So that's what I want to say. And then too, historically, let's give some points, some markers to show you how the movement has survived. So we talked about Callie House. We talked about Queen Mother Moore. Well, by the 50s and the 60s, Queen Mother Moore had an organization, a small organization, and she was using the word reparations. And Queen Mother Moore made her transition in 1996. I got a chance to see her briefly at the Million Man March in 1995, and she always pushed for reparations. And so if you go back to the 1972, the Black Nationalist Conference, where you had delegations, hundreds of organizations involved in 1972 in Gary, Indiana, Queen Mother Moore was there and told all the delegates, whatever organization you was with, don't forget your reparations. So we have been pushing and advocating for reparations. And so by the early 80s, by the mid 80s, again, I told you of the All African People's Socialist Party, Chairman O'Malley, the Uhuru movement out of St. Petersburg, Florida. They're actually in their papers, the Burning Spear newspaper, they're talking reparations and advocating for reparations. And they're the first that I see have an international tribunal where they brought brothers and sisters in from parts of America to present their case, parts of Africa to present their case, the Caribbean, the Isles of the Pacific, Central and South America to present the human rights violations that the United States and other European nations were in violation of. And they allowed them to present their case in the international tribunal. So, but now by the late 80s, you have in Cobra, and of course, Malcolm, all the great historical figures have for reparations. That included W.E.B. Du Bois again. Dr. King was clear on the reparations question. So you see anybody talking about they with Dr. King and they're not clear about reparations, then they don't know Dr. King's body of work. Dr. King is clear on the reparations question, not just the popular video footage that surfaced a few years ago where he's saying that they're owed a debt. We'll go back and look at some of his essential writings of Dr. King. He talked about how the Vietnamese will do reparations, and he used the word reparations and other nations. So let's be very clear about that. Malcolm is clear on the reparations question. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is clear on the reparations question. Dorothy Benton Lewis is clear on the reparations question. What's her name? Dorothy Tillman out of Chicago has a small organization on reparations. So the great ones have been clear on reparations. Frederick Douglass was clear on reparations. Go back and read some of his writing. Go back and read, and by 2000, the first book published to make the New York Times bestseller was called The Debt by Randall Robinson, 2000. That's the first time a Black author had written a book that makes the New York Times bestseller dealing with reparations. And then subsequently, even prior to then, there was one other book published by Toni Morrison dealing with Black reparations by Boris Whitaker. But now this is a European. He writes a book in the late 70s on reparations, but he was European. He was a college professor. But the book was published and was edited by Toni Morrison, the great writer of one of the great writers and figures of time. They are all supporters of reparations. But coming back to Randall Robinson, the debt, that put it on the national map. That's when white America and even the black petty bourgeoisie decided that maybe there is a case for reparations for our people. And then by 2015, Tanisi Coats published an article in the Atlantic, and that got nationwide and worldwide attention on reparations. And what was unique about it, Tanisi Coats initially did not support reparations, but his study and his work, it actually showed after he studied it and looked at it and saw atrocities and understood what it was, he's an advocate for reparations for Black people in America. But his article in 2015, it helped regenerate the reparations movement. And I missed some things, but part of that I was going to say, if you want to see how I've chronicled, you got time to do it later, how I've chronicled the reparations movement and broke it down into 4 different distinct periods in time. You can go online. I have a master's thesis. It's called The Movement to Secure Reparations for Blacks in America, and an analysis of fragmented models and methodology. The Movement to Secure Reparations for Blacks in America, and an analysis of fragmented models and methodologies. Where I chronicle, historically, I chronicle the movement and then bring it on up to contemporary time and make some suggestions at the end of that. But it gives you the history of some of the players in the movement. It gives the breakdown of the movement. It gives some of the organizations that have been key, critical in this movement. So here we are today with ADOS, who's done a great work on reparations. Cobra has done a great work. INVA, whole host of organizations. There's an organization, Institute of the Black World, great organizations, the Nation of Islam. All these organizations have done a great and an incredible work on reparations. And so my hat's off to anybody who's done anything to support the movement, but it has a rich history.
So let me ask,
yes.
I'm gonna jump in and ask a question. So John Conyers introduced this reparations bill back in the 80s. Why do you think of all these years because he introduced it up until his death, and now Sheila Jackson Lee carries this HR 40 that's a study. So let me ask you, why do you think that it's taken all these years and with very little progress? Because it just seems to me, from what I'm understanding, is that it's just been introduced. There was never really any real traction until now.
Yes, since 1989, HR 40, John Conyers bill, now Sheila Jackson Lee has picked it up. Part of the reason why it has is that, again, if you check out all the organizations, even many of the organizations today talking reparations, you got to ask, where's the model and the methodology for actually doing it? And there's a lack of model and a methodology for securing reparations. And because if you name me any of the organizations that have secured reparations for themselves or their body of people, then I'm going to be able to tell you what the model and the methodology was, generally. Now, a lack of unity with Black people, because that's one of the biggest dilemmas and hurdles that we have to get over with, is the lack of unity with Black people. And the other reason why Black people will not get reparations, and some who are afraid to unite. Well, our people, because of the trauma that we have suffered by Europe, there's a term that I was blessed to coin. It's called caucophobia, the collective fear or intimidation of European people, or those who classify themselves as Caucasian, white, Aryan, and Jewish. Caucophobia, the collective fear or intimidation of European people, or those who classify themselves as Caucasian, white, Aryan, and Jewish. Now, how is that significant in the movement? Black people generally will not accept a major, massive movement till whites get on board with it. Ms. Sheila, you'll understand that too. You ran several times, I guess a couple times, at the state level and at the national level. Well, there were white allies and whites and Europeans who accepted your candidate off the bat, but there were Blacks who decided, for whatever reason, they had a problem with your candidacy. But when you got allies, European, Latinos, or whoever, it's okay. Now we'll come over and listen to what you have to say. It's the same thing with the reparations movement. reparations has been looked upon as a radical and a very extreme. So blacks 10 years ago, the conversation we're having, even on up to the 2018 presidential election, and when candidates decided that they were going to run for office, and by 2019 and 2020, they're talking reparations. Well, that made it comfortable for other blacks, especially the black petty bourgeoisie, to say, you know what, I can look at reparations now. I can consider reparations now. And a lot of times that disunity, number one point to your question, the fear that we have about reparations, lack of model and methodology, and a lack of knowledge as far as an education about reparations, those are variables that at the end of the day, that's one reason why we have not gotten reparations. And so with that kind of a splinter, disunity, the ruling class know you're not ready for reparations. You ask, if you got 100 people on the line tonight, you ask them, what does reparations look like? How do we quantify it? You'll get probably nearly 100 different answers, because again, we have not put together a model. We haven't put together a current framework. All of the organizations have their 10-point or 12-point program about reparations, but again, to quantify it and look at it, that's where we're missing, in my estimation.
But right now there is, there's a lot of, it is getting a lot of traction.
Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. So right now we are getting, people are talking about reparations. I think the conversation, there's an appetite for it now. I'm glad that we're here in this moment, that, we now have a chance to not just have a seat at the table, but create our own table with what reparations is to look like.
I didn't hear your question.
No, I was saying, I think you're buffering a bit. I don't know. I hope everybody can hear both of us. I was saying that I'm just glad that now we are at a moment in history where we're being heard. This reparations message is finally being heard.
Yeah,
and the fact that we have we do have something in Congress. HR 40 is not, what it needs, nowhere near what it needs to be. But at least now the conversation is being had across the country.
Exactly. One of the keys too is that if once we consolidate the movement, when we get all of the different factions to sit down, and this has always been a historic struggle with Black people in America, because again, Black people have been so divided, we distrust each other. So we'll sit down and work with white allies and others before we work with others. The criticism sometimes is petty, sometimes it's constructed, sometimes it's legitimate criticism that we have about one another. But what we really have to do is say, you know what, regardless of the ideological, theological, philosophical differences, we want reparations for the masses. And so one of the things that we have to do, one of the things that we attempted this past summer is to have a summit, a National Reparations Summit, and invited all the reparations organizations heads or their representatives to come. It was not for anybody else.
Did he freeze, y'all? Uh-oh. I think he's frozen. Uh-oh. So hopefully we'll get him back. I could tell he was buffering. Yeah. So he's talking about unity, and I do believe he's definitely right about us coming together. I see. I will admit I'm new to the movement. I'm new to. This has been 30, 40 years in the making. This has been even longer than that with Dr. King and him going back and talking about W.E. Du Bois. It's been even further back than that. And those of us now, I see the fighting amongst these organizations. I see the fighting amongst those of us that are newer to the movement and the older guards. And I use the word guards because they're some of these other older organizations have been very territorial, and they've been it's been a struggle trying to find our place. When this generation of us we come to the table with a lot of know-how. where some of these other organizations, they're older, they've been around, we don't use pen and paper anymore. We're not, I think Mr. Muhammad is back. You're back, Mr. Muhammad? He's still buffering. Can you hear us, Mr. Muhammad? Log out and log back in again, because you're still buffering. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you all. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, you're just buffering really bad. What I was saying is that I do see going. Yeah, log out and log back in.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Yeah, log out and log back in. So I do see where, we come, like I said, this generation of us, we come to the table with the know-how. We may not have all the answers, and we may not have been around for as long as some of the other organizations have, but I can tell you, we know technology. We know how to, we know how to organize and galvanize our generation around this issue. So I think that what is missing with the movement and what is missing with our push for reparations is the collaboration. And I think he is spot on with making sure that we consolidate. He likes to use the word consolidate the movement. I have had several conversations with Professor Muhammad, and I believe he's right. Those of these leaders need to come to the table and say, how do we do this and how do we work collectively? I hate the fighting that I see amongst the movements. I hate it. I don't even go on Twitter for the most part. For those of you that know me, I have a Twitter account. I'm not very active at all because I hate it. I hate the fact that we fight each other. There's this new app, Clubhouse. To me, it's like Twitter on steroids. It's all of the fighting that happens amongst us in this movement. And I believe it absolutely gets us nowhere. And I wish that we would use that energy that we use to fight each other in this movement. I wish that we would use that energy to do just what Mr. Muhammad says, Professor Muhammad says, is that we collaborate. We figure out what these differences are, get beyond them, come up with something that's solid, a plan that works, that all of us can agree on. And then let's do this and let's work together. I don't want the fighting, honestly, it just has to stop. I think it's counterproductive. We're not going to go anywhere with it. It stifles the movement. It turns people off. There's a lot of people, I think, that will be very much engaged with us, with reparations. White allies, they see it. They see us fighting. They see it. How do we ask other people to come into the fold and help us when damn we fighting each other? So you back, Professor Muhammad? How we doing over there?
Yes. I'm just listening to you.
Yeah, I was just totally agreeing with you about, consolidating the movement and us coming together. I believe that is going to be the key to us moving anything forward in this new 117th Congress that's ahead of us.
Exactly. I was going to say too, think about it, put it in this context. If you have a relationship, say man and wife, you're married, if you really want that relationship to work, then that means that, and our motivation is correct, there's always common ground that we can find. Those who are in the reparations movement, who really want reparations for Black people, there's common ground that we can work with each other on. We may not agree on every point, but we know number one is that they owe us, there's a wealth gap. We can agree on that. We can agree they worked our people for 300 years with no pay. We can agree upon the fact that that at the end of the day, select multinational corporations owe us. We can agree at the end of the day, they're nonprofit organizations that owe us, the federal government, former plantations that still owe us. So that's one of the things that I'm pushing and advocating here at the National Reparations Institute. This is where we do our research. It is a nonprofit organization. This is where we publish. This is where we advocate for reparations for Black people in America. And again, at the end of the day, we can check our egos at the door and come and go to work, do the research, lay it out, because at the end of the day, it's a public policy issue. It's a public policy, and that's your background, Ms. Shealy, is that it's a public policy. So first off, let's be clear about what we want and what the demands are. And then from there, let's start.
I think we're clear. I think there's some clarity with every group. I think, and this is what I've said to you. I said there's, all of the groups and organizations, everybody has a piece to this puzzle. So I think we all have something so very valuable that to give to this movement and to make sure we all get reparations. I think the disconnect, like you say, I do believe it's a lot of ego. I think that there's, this tug of war between the older, those that have been doing this longer, and the younger generation of us, that we want a place in this too. How do we, where do we fit? How do we help? And I just don't think there's a whole lot of respect that happens among us. And I just, there's a lot that with our personalities, with the, I think we just have to, we got to drill down and get beyond that if we really want reparations.
I agree with you 120%. I agree with you. And at the end of the day, again, we have to, the self-criticism that we have to bring to the table and say, you know what, look, if the ruling class, and when I say the white ruling class, I'm not being silly and I'm not talking about all white people, but there is a legislative body, the House and the Senate will have to, at some point, vote on reparations for Black people in America. This is public policy here. And at the end of the day, if you're disunited, if we're disunited, it will never get to them. And that's part of the reason why Blacks for over 100 years have been advocating, marching, praying, asking for, demanding reparations, and still have not gotten really to the table to hammer out what complete reparations look like. Because again, we're divided. And again, if we can sit down and say, okay, we can coalesce with that body or group, what is it about us? The damage, the psychological damage has been so done that we can't sit down with each other and say, you know what, forget the philosophical differences, forget the theology, forget the ideology. And we're going to sit down and say in July and August this year, when we do the National Reparations Summit again, say that I will be there, or I will have a representative there from my organization, this organization, and that organization. Any Black man or woman, even on this broadcast, has a problem with that, then you have to check yourself, because again, your motivation is not correct. Because at the end of the day, we should not leave this to our children and our grandchildren to figure it out. We got degrees and everything. We got a little money, some of us, and some of us got a lot of money. But at the end of the day, why not reparations? Because reparations is for the masses of our people. It's not for us individually. It is for the masses of our people. So let's get over the selfishness, the greed, the ego, the arrogance, the chauvinistic piece that we bring to the table sometimes, and say, look, we can do this reparations, and let's do it for our children and our grandchildren. I'm pushing for reparations for my children.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, I would hate for my children to have to do this work. I would hate for another generation to come along and have to do this work, because this has been, what, like you say, 50, 60, 70 years in the making. Okay, 100 years in the making. Like the thought of that is exhausting. Like I'm tired just thinking about it. Like all the work that's been done before me, and then all the work that I see that still needs to be done right now. Come on, y'all.
Yep. And you're right about there is a generation gap to a degree. But what I'm still saying, in all of these organizations, there are one or two who understand historically where we are and contemporarily where we are and where we got to go in order to secure reparations, complete reparations. And I keep saying complete reparations. You hear around the country right now, Ms. Shealy, you hear that this city here is proposing a reparations bill. You hear the state of California proposing reparations. You see the city council. Well, that's not much of it. If you study it and look at it and be critical of it, that's not reparations now. Remember, I teach politics and global issues. I teach state and local government. By training, I'm a political scientist. Government is always supposed to provide a certain level of goods and services and a level of protection for its citizens. So you're not going to give a few scholarships your city and say you're providing reparations. The hell you are. Those are nothing but goods and services that you're supposed to provide anyway, that taxpayers are funding anyway. But what about the debt to Black people? And again, when you hear different cities and this politician saying we're proposing reparations, much of it is political patchwork. It's not reparations. Complete reparations, when you start talking about the restoration and the transformation of an entire people, that's complete reparations. So Pookie, Ray Ray, Shanae, and them, nobody's left out. The HBCUs are not left out. The black farmers are not left out. The black family is not left out. The black woman is not left out. Our children are not left out when we're talking complete reparations. And that's where the organizations we have to find the common ground. We can do it. We're going to be forced to do it, or otherwise you will never see black people make the restored and transformed to the degree that they can be, that it could be, and they should be. That will never happen. You can't bring me anything in the way of civil rights. You can't bring me anything in the way of more education, economic development that's going to make our people whole. It has to be complete reparations. See, we've tried everything else, but what we have not done is complete reparations. And so,
you know what? And you know what? I think with this Democratic presidency that we now have, and we have the House that's Democratic, and we might have a Senate that's Democratic. You know, I don't want to see any more social programs, and you call that reparations. I don't want that. I don't want you to, create a job, create these new opportunities, quote unquote, and you call that reparations. No, I really do want you to cut. I want you to give me some land, and I want you to cut the check. I really do.
Absolutely. Good point.
I really do. I want to be self-determining. I want to be able to provide. I realize the power of what if we had we owned our own land, and we lived on our own land, and we planted our own food, and we were self-sustaining. The power of that alone, just knowing that you don't have to worry about somebody kicking you out, knowing that you could go in your backyard and eat every day. That is half the pressure. Black people, we've been trying to make it. We live to survive. We living every day, working every day, going, we in this rat race and in this, trying to make it. But imagine if we were able to live on our land and feed ourselves. That is 80% of our problems right there.
Think about what you just said historically, because this is a historic conversation. Do you know after the Civil War, up in black people still, even during the Jim Crow era, black people still controlled over 14 million acres of land, and today we're down to less than 2 million acres of land. So the land, you're right now, the reason I pointed that out, because the land question becomes key. The minister said, if we're not talking millions of acres of land that they owe us, all of it is a compromise and a sellout. Because land is about liberation. Land is about freedom. You can feed, clothe, and house yourself if you're dealing with the land. But black people, now nearly 50 million black people in America, and we own less than 2 million acres of land.
Imagine, what I would do, and this is just, me thinking out loud again. I would get my solar panels, because I'm not paying nobody's electric bill. I have my solar panels, and I don't want no Cadillac. I want a tractor. I want a tractor so I can get on my tractor and till my soil and grow my vegetables. I could just see it. It just all makes perfect sense to me. It just makes perfect sense.
Ms. Sheila, you bring up another interesting point. Too often when we hear the term reparations, because of our lack of knowledge about it and the under the development of us around the whole reparations question, we say, okay, I want my check. But do you know a greater portion of the reparations will not be a check or currency? See, the dollar is falling. The devaluation of the dollar is there, and it's constantly being devalued. But at the end of the day, the land question, going back, and so some of the reparations piece will be free vocational training, free college education, wiping out student loans. And then two, again, we're talking millions of acres of land or some states or territories that they owe us as a people. And then the other question is that going back to what you said earlier, part of that package is farm equipment. We need thousands of pieces of heavy equipment for farmers.
I'm gonna have me a tractor. y'all gonna see me on the tractor. I'm gonna be riding. You'll be like, that's her. I'm gonna have me a tractor.
The United States owns a certain amount of precious metals and oil. Part of that is the reparations package too, because if they just gave everybody a check, in our mindset, we will still be in the same condition 8 months later, many of us, because where did we learn to invest? How did we learn to invest? Or have we ever learned to invest? Many of us have not. So at the end of the day, again, it's not just a check, but the land question has to be answered. A tax break for Black people, tuition waiver, whether it's vocational, because Pookie and some of them, not Pookie and Ray Ray and Peanut and them, not going to college, but
And
they
they
should
didn't
have
go,
free
and
vocational.
most of us haven't gone to college. So, you know,
Absolutely. The masses of, you're right. And how HBCUs are going to last, historically Black colleges. See, it's not just getting money for a building and scholarships at HBCUs. What will make them last, like major historically white universities? What does the endowment look like? How many billions of dollars do we have in endowment? That's where it becomes key and critical when it comes to survival and the thriving and the success of historically Black colleges. So, you know, when the reparations package, it looks like that. It looks like also, like I said, oil that we deserve, because all of these industries worked and they stole from us. Historically, how did Blacks get behind and there's such a wealth gap? Blacks did not generally benefit from the GI Bill. Almost 70 or 80 years of the GI Bill, very less than 1% of the Blacks who were eligible for the GI Bill actually got the GI Bill. The Homestead Act, where they gave millions of acres of land to white people, Black people as a whole never benefited from the free land. And then when you start historically talking about 40 acres and a mule, well, Black people never got the 40 acres, and the mule was never promised. It was a loan from Sherman, and that was only for 400,000 acres of land. That wasn't for the millions of acres that they had stolen from or taken from us. And Sherman, and of course, that was overturned. So Black people never got that. And so they were free, and again, but free to go where and free to do what. So they end up as sharecroppers, convict leasing. All of that happened as a result of once our people were out of chattel slavery here in America. We were still there was still a level of enslavement and servitude that caused Black people not to ever build wealth. And then remember too, it was against the law for Black people to have homes, to buy homes until a certain period in time. Then we had to deal with redlining in the Black community. So for generations, we have not been able to build generational wealth. And for those who are new on the line, you say, well, see, it sounds like Black people are whining. No, if you had put any other people in this condition, you'll see some of the same results. And does reparations work? Oh, absolutely. Let's go back and look after World War II, how many, at least 16, 17, 18 countries in Europe that were devastated. The economy was destroyed. The infrastructure was destroyed. The people's lives were destroyed. How did you go back and rebuild those parts of Europe and Germany now today? Well, they call it the Marshall Plan, nothing but reparations. So some of those economies are some of the top thriving economies in the world today, and certainly throughout Europe, but it was based on the Marshall Plan. Israel is there today. They don't call it reparations, but it's reparations. The U.S. is still, Germany and other countries are still paying Israel today. That whole welfare state used to be Palestine. Reparations is what got them to the point where they're parts of the key and political points in what they call the Middle East. And of course, we know it as Northeast Africa. But that's reparations. And so reparations is vitally important. Africa will never be free. Africa will never thrive until there be a reparation situation there. None of the Caribbean, Haiti. Why is Haiti the poorest region in the world, in the Western Hemisphere? Why is it the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere? Well, Haiti up until 1947 had to pay the French reparations. And I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but they paid millions of dollars in reparations after they defeated Napoleon and the French and ran them out of Haiti, and they were forced to pay reparations because the U.S. Warships set off the coast of Haiti, and then the French came back and threatened them. You will not survive, and you will not enjoy any freedom until the French get reparations. France is one of the major European power brokers economically today. That's because of the reparations they received from Haiti. So everybody has gotten reparations. So reparations work. So anybody tells you that reparations don't work, that's a pipe dream, and you niggas just don't want to go get a job. You just don't want to work. No, show them their history and show them that reparations has worked for your various European nations. It has worked in America for the Japanese. It has worked for the Native American people that are here. Reparations has worked. So Black people got to be organized. Black people got to consolidate the movement and educate and move forward about reparations and be clear about what reparations is. Because again, the lack of clarity right now in the movement is a major problem. So one of the things that we came up with after the National Reparations Summit this past summer, where we had over 30 organizations involved in the summit, and this year we hope to grow the summit, we came out with the National Reparations Declaration, which is a framework.
And that's part two.
For Black
and we'll
okay,
hold that. Yeah, for
yeah.
for this coming Thursday, part two. Hold the book up so we'll know what we're gonna dive into. Hold the book up.
Oh,
can you
yes,
hold it up?
Yes.
So we're gonna dive into the National Reparations Declaration on this coming Thursday for part two. So y'all be here Thursday at 7:00 p.m. We're gonna talk part two, talking reparations with Professor Reginald Muhammad. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. I'll see you on Thursday.
Have I been running my mouth and I let all the time lapse tonight?
No, say good night to everybody. We'll see them on Thursday. Tell them good night.
Oh, all right. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it, and hopefully some of it made sense. I know we tried to cover a lot of ground, but any of your questions, your critique or criticism, no problem. Bring it, because we want to improve what we're doing, and we want to unite all the forces on reparations. Again, let's stop being petty with the labels that we wear. All of us can sit down as adults, because at the end of the day, the objective is reparations for the masses of our people. So it's not one organization that has the answers, as Ms. Shealy said. It's not one individual that has it, but collectively we will get it. One of the things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did say, he said 95% of our problem could be solved just with our unity. 95% of our problem could be solved with our unity. And unity doesn't necessarily mean uniformity. All right.
Yeah, Thursday. You're supposed to say good night.
Thank you all so much for your time, and thank you for your attention. I will see you all in the up and coming days. Thank you.
We'll see you all on Thursday for part two.